Okay, thank you everyone for joining me on today's webinar, Managing Your Data in FCS Express. In today's webinar, what we're going to do, we're going to focus on the different file types that we could use in FCS Express, and also the different files that we can create as part of our FCS Express layout. Okay? What we're not going to do or focus on in today's webinar are some of our getting started type stuff, like inserting plots or inserting gates or creating stats. If those are topics in which you're interested, you can find that on our website, on our videos website at denovosoftware.com, or you can just go to our YouTube channel and find videos about the particular topic in which you're interested. Also, if you have various questions, please feel free to contact us through email at support@denovosoftware.com, and we'll be happy to help you with any questions or issues you may have. But today's webinar is specifically going to focus on what file types we can use in FCS Express. We're going to talk about the FCS Express layout and how we can work within that. What we're also going to do is we're going to talk about the concept of an iteration. Okay? And the concept of an iteration is what helps drive a lot of the automation in FCS Express. Okay? So if anyone uses our comprehensive batch processing feature, you'll know that the concept of an iteration is what helps FCS Express go from one sample to the next sample to the next sample to produce the different outputs that you need for your daily workflow, whether it's PowerPoints, PDFs, images, if you need to export your data through Excel. That can all be automated through batch processing by knowing and understanding what the concept of the iteration does for you in FCS Express. Okay, so for those of you that aren't familiar with an iteration, the idea is that an iteration is a data file or a group of data files that are viewed within your FCS Express layout as part of that analysis. Okay, the FCS Express layout, or the .fey file, as its extension is, displays the data from one iteration at a time throughout all the different pages and plots that are in that layout. Okay, so the iteration can be a single file. It could also be a group of files. Maybe that group of data that you want to analyze in that FCS Express layout refers to some type of experiment where multiple files are different time points within a study. Or maybe you're doing a titration experiment where you've collected multiple files, and each of those files are just different concentrations of antibody that you're using as part of that titration experiment. In FCS Express, there are multiple ways of how we can define these iterations and how we can use that iteration concept as a way to automatically help us as far as displaying that data and being able to automate batch processing to help FCS Express automatically load that data from sample to sample. Okay? So the iterations are really a great way to help you change from one group of data to the next group of data. Okay? And as part of that, what we'll do is we'll talk about the concept of an increment value and how our panels tool can help you define an iteration within your template. Today's webinar is also going to focus on how we can change and load data into the plots of an FCS Express template. Okay, and there are many different ways of how we can do that. And then finally, we'll wrap this up by how we can take our FCS Express layout and save it. So whether we want to save it as a way to create a template that we want to use for our routine workflow, or if we just want to save our FCS Express layout with data within it, and as a way to archive that work we've done. Okay. So we'll try to talk about all that as we go through today's webinar. Okay. So I already have an FCS Express template here where I've inserted plots as part of this. Okay. So the way we can actually load data into our FCS Express template is through a feature called the data list. And the data list can be found from our data tab. Okay. So from the data tab, if you click on the data list tool, you can open that right up. And the data list is this dockable window where you can just leave it on floating on top of your FCS Express layout like this, or you could dock it to the side. Okay. So for today's purposes, I'm just going to leave it here. But what we can do is we can load data directly into this data list. And the way we can do that is we can either click on the plus sign within the data list toolbar, and we could choose the option to add data file. And then when we do that, we'll get this option where we can browse and navigate to the data that we want to load in our FCS Express link. So whether it's data that's stored locally or if it's data that's stored on a network somewhere, you can browse to that location, and you can choose the different file types that you're using that you need to be analyzed and loaded into this template. Okay. So if you're dealing with flow data, you could load f.fcs, .lmd files. You can load data that's specific to particular platforms. So for example, if you're looking at Accuray data, or if you just wanted to look at the raw data coming from an Amnis platform, or if you're trying to load CSV files, you can load that data just by selecting that file type. And if there's any file that matches that particular type within that folder to which you navigated, then you can select it and add it to your data list, okay? So I'm working with flow data. I'm working within the context of FCS Express flow cytometry. So I'm going to be working in today's webinar using flow data as a way to show this. But know that regardless if you're using flow data or image data, all these files can be manipulated and use all the same features that you can find in FCS Express without any issue. Okay. The whole idea with FCS Express is that you can treat flow data and image data very similarly. Okay. So for starters, I'm going to select a file. I'm going to click Open File. Okay. What I can also do is I can load data directly from a window. Okay. So if I have an open window, I can choose the files I want to add. If I just hold my Control key, or I can hold my Shift key, select the files, and just drag them into my data list. Okay. From the data list, then I can now display these within my plots. And the way I can do that is, for example, I can take a file, I can drag and drop it onto a plot, or if I wanted a particular file to be loaded into this plot, I can select my file in my data list, and from the toolbar, I could choose the option to load that file into my selected plot. What I can also do is I can choose the option to change data on all the plots in my layout. So whether I have plots on this page and maybe I have plots on another page, I could change change all the plots in my layout to this particular file all at once just by selecting this option. Okay. And once you make that option, then you can see how the data automatically updates in my plots on this page. So any gating strategy that you have already integrated into your template, whatever parameters, whatever stats you have coming from these plots and parameters, you can see how those all automatically update in real time. I'm just going to undo that again. So what we can also do is we can change data directly from the Data tab. Okay. And you'll see that from the Data tab, we have the ability to change data on a selection, or we can change data on all objects. Okay. So again, if I wanted to change data within a particular plot, I could select the Select option. I can navigate to a file. And through this method, what we have are two different ways of how we can grab data. So we have the ability to open what's called our standard open data dialog, which is the same window that you previously saw where we could just navigate to a particular location and grab that data. Or we could use our advanced open data dialog tool. Okay, and this gives you a little bit more option as to how you can actually go get that data. So you have the ability to, again, browse like you did previously. But what you could do here is you can also select your files directly from your data list. Okay? And if you have any active files already loaded into your layout, then you could actually grab it from this tab as well. For these purposes, I'm simply just going to go to my data list tab and I'm going to select the file that I want to load in. Just click OK. And you'll see that it's automatically loaded to that plot. And I could do the same for change data on all objects. Okay. So again, just choosing the same option. I could grab the data from my data list. And again, they all automatically update for me. Okay, so once we have data in our data list, once we have data in our plots, then how can we navigate between all the different files that we want to analyze that we have in our data list? Well, we could do that one of a few ways. Okay, so first of all, in our data list, you'll see that we have these iteration numbers. Okay, so the iteration numbers allow us to simply just click on those numbers, and the data for that iteration automatically loads in our plots above. Okay, I could do the same thing from our data tab. Okay? So from our data tab, you'll see that there are these arrows where, again, I can just navigate to the previous or next files in my data list, or I could select the iteration that I want to display from a drop-down menu. I also have the ability to just change my data on a particular object. So if I select one plot or multiple plots, then I can just change the data just on those selected objects. Okay? Very easy. And then finally, what we can do is we can actually just double-click a file in the data list. So let's say I want to display this particular file. And when I double-click on that file, you'll see there are a number of options that I can perform for this file when I double-click on it. So this will give me the ability to change this file, as well as a number of other options. So if I wanted to change to a particular file, or maybe I wanted to create a plot for that file, I could just choose the appropriate option, click OK. And in this case, I could simply just select another plot type that I want to use for this particular file. And the last way that we can change data within these plots is we can simply just right-click within a plot. You'll see that there's an option to change a file, or we could change the file using that advanced open data dialog that we've seen earlier. Okay, and again, it functions very much in the same way, where we can go to the data list and grab whatever file we need to, just like we've seen before. And once we change the data, then we have the ability to change it just on the base overlay or all the overlays, or if we have a plot that has multiple overlays within that plot, then we can select the overlay that we want to replace with this new file. Okay, so far you can see how working with single file iterations like we have here, how easy it is to not only select a file and load into the file, but also how we can go from file to file to file, and how that data automatically updates in my plots in FCS Express. And when that data updates, you can see how any stats that are associated with that data will also update too. Okay. So now I want to talk about, what if we have multiple files that we want to group together? Okay. So here I have an experiment where my experiment is made up of two files. The first file is my control file. The second file is a stain file. Okay, and I'm sure many of you have worked with similar experiments, whether it's two files or multiple files. But the idea is that you have maybe some control files, and you basically want to see the data that makes up the stain as it relates to those controls too. Okay, and the way my data is displayed here, I have one plot that's looking at my control, one plot that's looking at my stain, and then I have another plot where I have them both overlaid on top of it. Okay. So what I can do with my FCS Express template is I could design this in a way where FCS Express will automatically know where each component of that experiment and what plots those files are being displayed within that experiment. Okay. So what I can do is I can actually go to my data tab, and I can use a couple of the features that we've talked about before. And the first one I'm going to talk about is my increment value tool. Okay. So my increment value tool allows me to set the number of files that I want to define for an iteration. Okay. So you'll see that our default is 1, and that's why every a file is treated as a single iteration. Okay, so if I wanted to group these together as a group of 2 files, then what I can do is I can come into my increment value and change that to 2. And when I do that, you'll see what happens in my data list. Okay, those 2 files are now make up 1 iteration. That's important because now if I want to load multiple files of the same type of experiment, then what I can do is I can just take that data, again, either add it to my data list by clicking on the plus sign in my data list, or if I have the folder, I can simply just take that data and just drag it over. Okay. Then I can click on the iteration number, and you'll see that FCS Express automatically loads the data with that second set of data, that second iteration. And it keeps a relationship of how the components of that iteration are being displayed. Okay, so in this particular case, it knows that the first file in my iteration is being displayed in this plot, the second file is being displayed in this plot, and this third plot is showing both of them overlaid on top of it. And it'll keep that relationship as I go from iteration to iteration. Okay. Along those same lines, what we can do is we can use our panels tool as a way to do the same type of work. Okay. The panels tool actually brings a little bit more functionality to it, because what it does, it'll actually incorporate that as part of your template. So that way, the minute you load data into your data list, it'll know that the data, the iteration that's associated with this data is going to be of a certain increment value. Okay. In other words, if I create this particular FCS Express template as a 2-tube panel, it'll know that, and it'll let me automate the fact that once I load this data into my data list, it'll automatically load my data into my plots for me. Okay, so let me show you. So from the Data tab, you'll see that we can access our Panels tool. We can also access our Panels tool down from the bottom of our FCS Express layout. Okay, so whether we click on this or if we click on this tool, it'll bring us to our panel information window. Okay. So we can add a panel, and we can give our panel a name. We define the number of tubes that make up that panel, and we have the ability to provide names for these tubes. Okay. Now the name is not critical. You're not required to put a name in there, but if you wanted to, so that way you can remember that my first tube is my control, my second tube is my stain, especially if it turns out that the name of the file might not necessarily be indicative of what that particular file is. This is a great way to do that, so that way you know and you have certainty and confidence in what you're trying to insert into your data list. Okay, so once you outline that, then you can click OK. You'll see that the new panel that you just created is now active. And then once we click OK, you'll see the change in our data list, where now we have those labels inserted here directly. And also at the bottom of our FCS Express layout, it'll tell you that the panel that you just created is now active. Okay? So now if I actually come back in and try to load data into my data list, you'll see what happens when I select a file to load into my layout. Okay? So FCS Express will know that this is now a 2-tube panel that's associated with this FCS Express layout. And when I try to select a file, the software will prompt me for whether or not I want to also load in the next file that's loaded in that folder for me. Okay, so if I click yes, you'll see now that it automatically loads that here for me as well. And then just like before, I can click on the second iteration, and the software will automatically go to that file, that set of data for me. Okay, so now that I have all these iterations defined, how does this help me? So not only is it a quick way to display multiple experiments at the same time or multiple samples at the same time, what I can do is it can enable me to batch my data. Okay, so let's say that I simply just want to export my data to PowerPoint as part of my routine analysis. Okay, so what I can do is I can actually create a batch processing step here as part of this routine analysis and have it saved as part of this template. So now if I actually run my batch, you'll see that the software will tell me how many samples I have or how many iterations, and it packages the data for me within my export. Okay, so now it was able to go through all the different iterations and it was able to produce my data according to the formats that I have outlined as part of that batch processing step. Okay, so again, if you're interested in more information about how batch processing works and how these iterations can work for you in batch processing, please either watch our videos regarding batch processing or again, just contact us at support@novosoftware.com and we'll be happy to help you out with that. Okay. Okay, so now this brings us to our final step. Now what we can do is we can save this data as a template, or we can save this with data embedded in my FCS Express layout. Okay, and the way we could do that is just by going to our File menu and click our Save As option. Okay. So when I click that option, what I can do is I can come in and actually save this data in a number of different ways. So first, I want to show you how we can actually save this as an empty template. So again, if this was an application that we're doing routinely as part of your daily workflow, then what we can do is we can come in and save this layout as an unlinked template. I'm going to give this a name, and I'm going to give it a location where I want to save it. Okay, I could save this on my desktop. I could save it wherever I want. Okay, I'm going to click Save. If I close this layout, what I can do is I can come back and open it up. And I could do that directly from my FCS Express startup screen. Or if I just double click the icon from my desktop or from a folder, that template will automatically open for me. Okay, and just as we just discussed before, what we can do to load data into this template is simply just by loading it into the data list. So again, whether we drag it in from a folder or if we just choose the option from the plus sign here in the data list toolbar, we can go in and find that data. Select the files that we want to analyze. And you see that FCS Express will group them for me accordingly and also automatically load them into my plots for me. Okay. And as part of this template, FCS Express will retain whatever batch actions I've saved as part of this template. Okay. Now let's say I actually wanted to save this, a copy of this template with data already embedded in it, the way I analyzed it. Okay. Maybe I want to tweak this gate a little bit. Maybe I want to move it around or something, depending on what I want to do. And if I want to save this as a way of archiving it, what I can do is I can come in, choose the option to save as, and I can choose one of two options of how FCS Express can save the data in this layout. Okay? So there are two options of how we can save this data. We can save this data as linked, or we can save it with the data embedded. The linked option means that your template resides in one location, the data resides in another location. As long as the relative pathway remains the same the next time you open up this linked layout, the data will automatically load into FCS Express. If it turns out that relative pathway has changed for whatever reason, maybe things get moved, maybe they get deleted, whatever it may be, FCS Express will see that that change has been made, and it'll prompt the user to reestablish that new link and to go find that data wherever it may be now. Okay? Embedded means that the data that was displayed at the time of saving gets embedded directly into your layout. Okay, so we'll have a copy of the layout with whatever data is being displayed at this time, and that gets saved as its own whole document. So let's say you want to, if you were collaborating with someone and you wanted to send them a copy of this layout and they were another FCS Express user, you could save this data as an embedded layout and just email it to them or provide it to them depending on what the size of the data might be after you saved it as the embedded. Okay, and that's the main difference here. So the linked file is going to be much smaller because basically it's just a link between the two files, and the embedded layout is going to be much larger depending on what data, the size of the data, how much data is actually saved within that layout. Okay. Either way, you could choose that option and save it. And this is a great way to archive your data in the long run. Also, as part of our batch actions, we have the ability to make this a routine part of our workflow where we could tell FCS Express to save a copy of my data and whether I want to link it or have it embedded. I also have the ability for FCS Express to uniquely name these files for me. Okay, so I can have FCS Express grab keyword information from my data and to use that information to uniquely name these exported files for me. Okay, the whole idea is to automate the process so that way you don't necessarily have to have FCS Express or have to manually save these on your own and have them, you name these files on your own. FCS Express can automatically do that. Depending on what keywords you want to use, FCS Express will grab the values of those keywords and save that in the naming of the file that you create. Okay? And again, as we mentioned earlier, these are FCS Express layouts. These get saved in a .fey extension. Okay? And these FCS Express layouts will contain your data within them. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up all the different things that we want to talk about today with regards to managing data. So in conclusion, I hope you can see that FCS Express offers various intuitive options to allow you to change your data in your layout and basically how to save that data in our layout. So whatever is the easiest method for you or the most intuitive, hopefully you can see that from here and make that an easy part of your routine workflow. Okay? And also with the concept of iterations, hopefully you have a better understanding of an iteration and how that can work for you and how we can set that up and how those iterations can allow you a quick way to change from one group of data to another if you want to review that data or if you want to batch that data in batch processing. Okay, and then finally, being able to create a panel within your template is a great way to quickly define a routine assay that you may perform and also the list to choose for that assay, so that way you can load them into your FCS Express layout, into the data list, and have FCS Express automatically load that data into your plots for you. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, if there's anything that maybe I missed, or any further questions that you may have regarding any of the topics that we have, or even if there are other things that in which you're interested and you have questions about those, please email us at support@denovosoftware.com. If there are any new users of FCS Express, out there, or people who are interested in FCS Express and you're curious about what we can offer, please feel free to download a trial from our website, denovosoftware.com. You can click on the link and register for a free 30-day trial where you can use your own data. You can also find many resources on our website, various videos, an online manual, different tutorials, and also sample data if you want to use that data with the tutorials that we offer. Okay. I'm going to stay on the line for a little bit to answer any questions that you may have. Otherwise, thank you for joining us, and have a great day.